Okay, so some early morning thoughts, like completely unrelated to much of anything. I just woke up and I was watching a video. I'm like, okay, so like, I feel like with regards to the MCU, there has definitely been like a shift that people have been experiencing. Like, I feel like the way that we view the MCU pre, like phase, the end of Phase 4, like in the end of Phase 3, like Endgame and post Endgame are like is so divided now, and that divide makes us think that like pre Endgame was like this paradise of good films, and now like the MCU is completely fallen off, and they have no idea what they're doing. But like, do people not remember like Phase 2 and how tumultuous that phase was? Like, there were so many movies in that phase that people watched and thought were complete ass. Like Thor: Dark World. People even hated Age of Ultron. Iron Man 3 at the time was very well hated. I know the discourse has changed on that movie quite a bit, but back in the day, people hated it and didn't review it well. Even in Phase 1, there were plenty of movies. Like, I remember when those movies were first coming out, people reviewed them in different scales. Like, a lot of people didn't like Thor 1. A lot of people were like okay on the first Captain America. People didn't like Iron Man 2. Like, these this at least from reviewers, like this idea that like the current landscape of the MCU is so much worse than they were before, and they so don't know what they're doing now, and they're so falling into like this lack of quality and wokeism if you're one of those guys, and like all this other shit is like, is that really true? Is this really that strange of a period for the MCU? I think what it is that Phase 3 was such a high level of quality and such a climax for so many of these properties that like everything afterwards is just struggling to keep up, because like there's naturally going to be a period of reset where like we've climaxed and now we need to falling action. Like we need to like take a step down so we can re-escalate to something good, potentially. And the fact that like we've de-escalated so much and the stakes are all weird and things aren't like a clear incline from Endgame, it's like people see it differently, and they, even though really all we've done is just kind of go back to Phase 1, Phase 2 ish era and like continue to develop things up, which again, whether or not you think they're doing a great job at that is neither here nor there. I'm just talking about like the quality of the movies and like kind of the direction they're going. Like right now, and really not even the quality of the movies. It's mostly a TV thing too. Like the movies are relevant, but still, mind you, I get it. There has been a decline in quality, but it's not that fierce. I think it's more of a thing of like us being just used to these things, so they don't hit the same way. So going back to a phase that it's just like chill movies, don't have to worry about too, not like putting too much effort into each of them, and like trying to do so much at the same time. Like it is wearing down on what things are, but at the same time, is it really that much worse than what we've had before? Like, is the MCU this paradise of good movies pre Endgame, and then like suddenly becomes shit afterwards? No, I don't think it's that simple. Like it had shit before, and right now we're just in a phase where they're figuring shit out, and so not everything's gonna be great. That being said, I do think there's a lot of things post Endgame that are fantastic. Like I'm a huge fan of Loki. I remember having a great time just watching that show like week to week and talking with my friends and the discourse that was happening. It was great. It was like probably the best time to be a post MCU fan, besides like WandaVision, which was also pretty fun. But like I think generally the shows have been fine. We all agree that like apparently Guardians was really good. I haven't gotten around to watching it. It's on my list. But Guardians was really good. People really like No Way Home, of course. Like there was obvious highlights here and there, which I think is more in line with where we've been before. Like there's been these like in the previous phases, really, in general, even in Phase 3, which is like really really good, generally, at least in my opinion. There's plenty of like films that people were like, I didn't like that one that much, or that movie's trash. Like people hate Ant-Man too, and they hate Captain Marvel, generally speaking, or at least like that's the loudest voices tend to be. Even though I genuinely like Ant-Man, and Captain Marvel was alright for me. It's like it's this sense of like forgetting that there's always been a variance in quality and not everything has always hit, and like this whole thing is like a balancing act, like acting like you fucked up so we're done with you is crazy. In my opinion, like I understand the burnout of course, but like it makes sense that they be messing up because they've always been just playing things by ear, and they got better at it as like the Infinity Saga continued onward because they had more of a direction, more of an idea of where they could go, more of like used to doing this particular thing, and now they're not doing that thing and they're trying to do it again, and it's difficult. It's the same reason why like the DCU. Wait, is that how that goes? The DC cinematic universe is so complicated because they're trying to replicate what the Infinity Saga was during the Infinity Saga when that shit ain't even finished yet, and while they didn't have a plan, now Marvel's in the same seat, and while they have way more experience at it, it's also like, it's gonna have some like failings here, and other things are gonna work better. The thing is, I also like the like like there is the whole plan for what it is, but then you also have to understand that like to a certain degree it's also a variety game. Like we're trying to make a bunch of different things, and like let people experiment here and there and try stuff, and that will result in different things, especially since there is a plan. So there's like this conflict that happens, which is what we're seeing a lot of the cracks of the MCU, which I think is important. Like even if like the quality of things to certain people is just like not as good, I think if Marvel's smart, they'll learn from this, and they'll take this forward and improve significantly because like modern superhero watching fans expect more. I don't necessarily think that this is the end of superhero movies, by the way. I don't think that's ever going to be the case because if you really look back to like even the earliest superhero movies, like they've always persisted. It's just the media of like comic book heroes and that kind of stuff is just enduring. So it makes sense that it will continue to live on even if we have like another series of like rough spots. I mean, really, if you look at the landscape overall, it's not like we're not getting really good superhero movies. Like we've in this year alone, we've had like three. No, maybe not this year because I forgot the Batman came out last year. But anyways, like in this recent swash of time, there's been a ton. Like there's Spider Verse, which was fantastic. There was Guardians, of course, which I've heard was really good, and then there's the Batman a little while ago, which was also really good. Like we're talking about like really good comic book movies. They're still being made. It's just not all of them. Which even back then was never the case. Like it's always been a matter of like these ones are like the best, and then these ones are okay, and I think that's okay. Like I think honestly, it's a weird thing to bring up because this has always been the MCU's strength, but I think honestly having less of a focus on making everything tied together going forward would be good because it gives people a bit of a breather, and it also allows you to really break the reins on like these individual projects. Like they don't all have to turn out the same and all have the same kind of ending. Like I think that's currently what the problem is right now because you can tell things like Moon Knight or She Hulk or Loki. Well, specifically She Hulk and Moon Knight really tried to like break that like third act thing. That like it has to have a big battle at the end, which was huge criticism for WandaVision, and also apparently how Secret Invasion ended, and that was like really really bad from what I heard. But like like being able to break out of that more naturally by just letting people do what they need to do would be great because then you don't really have to. But it's also just a matter of like it'd be great, but it's also a matter of like taking the reins away a little bit and letting things happen, which could very easily throw things off permanently, of course. But like allowing for more creativity and experimentation in this phase is, I think, important, very important. Because I think Loki did that really, really well in terms of its ending not being like this big action climax, because it was just a conversation and a really good conversation. Yeah, no, it's one of those things where like maybe you don't have the big battle, maybe think about analyze how we do these finales, right, and fit them properly to whatever series it is, and like take this time. There's going to be a downtime inevitably when it comes to any like big, like if you just finished a high point, and I talked about this a little bit earlier. If you just finished a high point like Infinity War and Endgame, there's going to inevitably be a drop off because you can't just top Endgame. You keep trying to top that, you're gonna find a point where you just cap out and then you're done. What you have to do is take a step back and restart. You know, like you can't keep escalating forever and ever and ever. That's a problem that a lot of things run into. Is like trying to always top, always do something bigger, always make this huge spectacle. But that's something that really only works if it's earned, and it takes a long time, which we all know because we've seen it happen 3 phases in a row. Like it takes a while to get to that level, and then once you are there and you feel like you can't overcome it, then what do? You have to step back, get a pair back, and it's going to result in downtime, you know, stuff where things aren't always going to be to the level that you thought it was before. And also, like, maybe it's pared bound, but it's actually not as far away from how we started off and begin with. It just feels different because we've experienced so much in that time, you know? It's a common problem. Like Super Smash Brothers right now is facing that exact problem because the next game can't be ultimate. Like the last game was like every character, every like almost every stage, just tons of music, and now the next game is probably inevitably not going to be able to reach those levels, and that's just life. And it's gonna disappoint people. It's probably not gonna do as well, but that's part of being able to do that big thing again is taking a step back. Which, yeah, I think I made a video before this, or I had thoughts about it, and I didn't really speak it, maybe. I don't know. I don't remember what I do. But, it's that idea of, like, do we really want something to continue just because, like, we like this thing? Or should we appreciate it for what it is, where it is, and when it is, you know? Like, everybody's like when a show gets canceled that was like really popular or something, people were like, man, we should bring back that show, we should bring back that show. But then like what happens when the show keeps running for years and years and years and years and years and years, way past like the original creator's passion and drive for it? Often the quality drops off. If you look at tons of shows that have gone on forever, like SpongeBob or Simpsons and stuff, like you always see these discourses about people being like, man, the first couple seasons of this thing were magical, and then the rest of it are like, eh, you know. Like, people are always gonna come to that conclusion because like there is a grace period in which something is just what it is, and then there's always going to be that idea of like we need to keep extending it, and how is this going to keep working? And some series are really good about doing that and keeping things fresh no matter what. Like this series can keep going forever just because it's never ever bound to one thing. Like one of the most beautiful examples of that, and I know this is not going to be something that resonates with everybody, but like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is a series that knows how to fucking extend itself, because every time a major arc ends, they just shift up the style, shift up the setting, shift up the protagonist. Pretty much a brand new show set within a similar like rule set, and then like whatever. And like on top of that, every single encounter is like this wild idea that can come out of nowhere, and it works. And that series is really good, despite the fact that it's been going for like 30 years and still has new parts coming out. Like that series stays fresh simply because it never needs to top itself. It just keeps going wherever the creativity leads it. but not every series has that. Like if you look at other like shonen, even like you can't just keep stretching things out like that. And most shows don't. Most shows or like books or whatever don't have such a non-linear and like kind of free form creative like groundwork to be able to do that. And I think that's only something that this one series manages to get away with because it's so specific and unique, I guess. You know? I think shows should end unless you have some way to like unless you have the black magic to be able to be like, yeah, I'm gonna end my show and then start a new show that's set in the same universe that has a completely different characters and it's gonna be totally different and it's feels like it's it's the same series continuing while it's also a completely new series and it works. Like that's so rare. Anyways, in regards to the MCU, I think like maybe I don't think it's possible to end that. It's just too much money, too much investment, too many people who are interested in characters who haven't appeared and all that stuff. Like people we're pigeonholed. We can't get out. Like, I still want to see the next Spider-Man movie whenever it comes out. I still want to see like where like all the secret wars and stuff goes. Like I'm going to watch Loki season 2, even though I haven't been watching everything in the MCU currently. Like there's a certain extent of like I'm always gonna want new superhero movies if they're good, you know. So like I don't think they could stop, but I think it's a matter of just like maybe slowing down or even just like mixing things up a little bit, you know, allowing there to be a little bit more creativity because like when they do go off the walls and do something really like creative and not bound by like the MCU's style, not Kevin Feige led per se, like things get really interesting. Like there was that Werewolf by Night thing that everybody complimented being like really good because it was like super duper weird and different, and that's great. You know, weird and different is what they need at this point. And right now, I think there's a certain degree of safety, and that safety is actually what, ooh, to tie all my ideas together, is what holds it back a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. You see, because, like, the safety is going back to what already was, and already was is, like, further steps back rather than stuff new. So we find ourselves feeling like it's a downgrade to go back to how things were before rather than to progress forward after Endgame. Hmm. It's like going back to phase 1, phase 2, and people don't see those phases. They subconsciously see it better than it was, but they also don't see those phases as good as they were when we presented those kinds of like establishing experimental kind of wacky formulaic phases as like something new, as a new package. Hey, phase 4 is like phase 2, but new version of it. People are gonna look at it and be like, that's whack. It's not as good as the original phase 2, or not as good as phase 3. So why are we even doing this? And that's why I think you gotta do more weird shit. It's always when people get really creative and like really take a huge leap on things that things either blow up spectacularly or you get the kind of stuff that changes the whole medium because like that's what Guardians did. That's what the Avengers did. That's what the Avengers did. That's what Guardians of the Galaxy did. That's what a lot of like things like Werewolf by Night and other stuff like that did. Like when you really do something different, it stands out. Anyways, that's just my thoughts. Hopefully, I realize it's too long to be a short now, so it's just gonna be a video that's in this aspect ratio. Oops. Anyways, thank you for watching.